Both Mr. Weisner and Mr. Wobser contacted me earlier to let me know they weren't going to be at this evening's meeting. I will entertain a motion to excuse. Mr. Slout, second Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of excusing the councilman, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. They are excused. Please stand for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the previous minutes of City Council. Mr. Slout.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the acceptance of the previous City Council minutes say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. They are approved. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons to tonight's agenda?
Yes, sir. We have a letter from City Engineer Calb concerning Broad Avenue storm culvert repair, and that we will recommend we add that to the reports of municipal officers and municipal departments, and also Ordinance 2022-030, which is legislation for what that letter is talking about for Broad Avenue storm culvert repair, and would also move that that be added to the agenda.
Is that in the form of a motion to add?
Sir.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding that to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. That is included. We have no proclamations, no recognitions or retirement resolutions. We do have two petitions.
An alley vacation request from Dan Stone, Van Horn Hoover and Associates on behalf of the petitioner Stan Richards to vacate a portion of an existing road right-of-way of McLean Drive, the very southern end of the roadway in the cul-de-sac area.
Questions or comments? This will be referred to the City Planning Commission and the P&Z Committee.
Zoning amendment request from Dan Stone, Van Horn Hoover and Associates on behalf of FinTech Limited and Mardic Investments Incorporated to change the zoning of Technology Drive, which is Lot 11, and Midwest Court, which is the unplatted east of Lot 11, to M2 multifamily high density. It's currently zoned C2 general commercial.
Questions or comments? This will be referred to the City Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning Committee. We have no oral communications this evening. We do have two written communications.
I only know of one. What's the other?
Where you get the letter from Calba?
That's,
Oh, that'll go down.
yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, we only have one.
Email from Bill Trame regarding sidewalk on East Melrose Avenue.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
Yeah, I'd make a request that this email be read into the record.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor that the email be read, say aye. Any opposed, nay. Please read the email.
Would it be possible to install a sidewalk on the north side of Melrose Avenue between the Crawford Station Apartments and the Hancock County Health Building? There are numerous residents from many apartment complexes that walk to get groceries and other supplies. There is not a sidewalk in this section, forcing pedestrians to walk on the road. The problem is confounded by construction on the south side where the sidewalk is closed for utility work. It is dangerous with so many pedestrians being forced to walk on the roadway. Thank you for your consideration.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
Yeah, I think Mr. Trame raises a really good question, and I know I've asked some questions to city engineer and law director and Mr. Cordiner from Hancock Regional Planning, and I know we have some city ordinances that speak to this, but my reading of the ordinances says that it should be built out. And I know the conversation, just an email conversation with Jeremy, said no, it doesn't get a sidewalk until they start doing building on the lot. Well, that could be for ages. And here's a place where, we recently last 10 years or so, improved the street. It should have a sidewalk, and it seems like this is something that deems more or deserves more attention. And I guess a question to the council is: do we get the email and say, yeah, it should, and then just kind of let it sit? Do we have streets and sidewalks take a look at this? Do we look at our city ordinance on sidewalks and potentially update that to ensure that in situations like this that the sidewalks are mandatory? It's kind of an open question to the rest of council. And if anybody in the administration wants to jump in and weigh in, I'm all ears. But when it comes to issues that the citizens talk to me about, sidewalks and I'm sorry, Jeremy, carriage walks are high on the list. And especially if we're building workforce housing, so we're building it close to where the workforce is working, i.e. tall timbers. And we build it there so that they wouldn't have to rely on cars in order to get to work. We should make it easier for them to get to work than walking in a street.
Ms. Mayor.
So, councilmen, certainly don't disagree that we should review the policy that's currently in place. This specific situation, my understanding is that our goal is to always make sure that there is a safe route, even if it isn't the most convenient. As the individual mentioned, there is a sidewalk on the south side that has previously been utilized and developed, but given the current utility work, it's closed, which is forcing pedestrians into the roadway, and certainly that's not ideal, but we can't necessarily go in and just force the property owner, given our current policy, to add a sidewalk in this specific situation. So this morning, as Engineer Kalb, myself, Service Safety Director Martin, and myself were discussing along with our department heads, this is something that we will be requesting to discuss further, along with a number of other items in the Street, Sidewalk, and Parking Committee later this year.
So the three parcels are owned by one company, I believe an LLC with an address in Florida. Anybody ever reached out to them and say, can we put sidewalks in on your property? And if it is, how much would it cost the city to put them in? Can we put them in and charge and put it on the so that we get reimbursed by them when they finally develop it or something? Or are there other options? Because in this case, there is a public good for this, that we don't necessarily want to wait for the private individual to do that, and if the public's representatives, us, say, yeah, that's a good expenditure of money, why can't we do it? If we get agreement with the one property owner, the one company that owns the three properties, so it's not like we're dealing with a bunch of different folks. Is that even a possibility?
So I think everything is always a possibility. To your point, I don't believe we have reached out to the specific property owner. It's not the practice of the city of Findlay to force individuals, given our current policy is in place, to force installation or to do it on their behalf. I don't necessarily think I would be in favor of that, just, again, given that that's not our current policy, and that could open up an interesting can of worms that I don't think I'm interested in. But we would be happy to reach out to them. I appreciate you forwarding the email that was sent to council last week. So we will reach out to the property owner, unless maybe Rob already has, but we will look into it because we recognize there is a public threat. But ultimately also, it's not like we can go in. My understanding is that AEP is tomorrow going in and adding steel plating to allow for safe passage outside of the roadway in the interim as they're completing the construction. That way you were going to add?
That was my point.
I'm on top of it.
Any further questions or comments? Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, people have already worn a path right there where a sidewalk would most likely go on the north side of Melrose. People are going to continue to use it until we put one in. It's going to be a muddy mess when it rains. So it's being used now.
Go ahead.
I may regret saying this, but I always tell my husband that grass is nature's carpet and we can walk on it. So I understand it is not ideal, and we certainly want to address the issue long term. In the interim, being able to walk on grass is suitable given the existing weather conditions. I am encouraging people to do so. I recognize it is not ideal, and we will work to address the root cause. But I can't go in and force somebody to install a sidewalk just because it's ideal in this exact moment.
Mr. Palmer?
I'm not
follow-up?
suggesting we force somebody, but we're going to have to move forward on this and get something done.
Mr. Russell?
I'm curious as to how a situation like this looks from a perspective of our ADA rating, considering we are going to round all our intersections and doing this ADA work, and then here we have a gap like this. I don't believe that ADA would rate grass and/or worn dirt as being ADA compliant. So, does ADA just not look at this because it isn't developed, even though it is used, or because it seems like ADA, and I appreciate Jeremy's getting up here to answer, like that's the tail that wags the dog a lot of times, yet.
So ADA requires that the city and or individuals provide a safe route, even if it is not the most convenient route, which historically we have in this area. Obviously, there is temporary utility restrictions that are causing this impediment, and that is why we are now working with the utility company to modify the route. So I understand, yes, ADA typically is the barrier, carriage walks, etc. It's not ideal. We will visit the policy. Short term, I don't have a great solution other than trying to create a safer environment for folks, working with the utility company to put in the temporary passage with the steel plates, or working with folks who are able to cross through the grass.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
Treasurer's Reconciliation Report for February 28th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Traffic Commission minutes of February 22nd, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
A letter from Fire Chief Eberly regarding a donation from P&A Industries.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Grant Administrator of the Hancock Regional Planning Commission, Lizzie Essinger, regarding the CHIP 2022 program.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Planning Commission agenda for April 14th, 2022, as well as the minutes of March 10th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Agenda and minutes to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the second capital improvement appropriation of 2022.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding utility location pickup replacement number 2504800.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Jeremy, how what's the criticality of this? Is this a tonight? Is this the next meeting?
I don't think it has to be tonight, but next meeting would be great, because right now we're trying to secure a vehicle. I'm sure everyone knows how difficult that is, so we're securing a vehicle. That will give us a little bit more time. We do have a vehicle. Yes, it's inconvenient, but we've been making it work for a while, so another 2 weeks isn't going to hurt us. But if it doesn't need to be tonight, yes, it'd be great, but if we could next meeting, that'd probably be the best.
Thank you. Any other questions? Letter be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the VHF radio system, project number 319-83000.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Jeremy, wasn't this? Did we not know we were going to the water towers with this project? Did we miscalculate? Did we engineer or bid this or something? I mean, I don't understand how we're like this close and didn't get this.
So this project's been going on for I don't know how many years now.
Time.
A long time. Well, since then, our fiber that we installed 2 years ago or something like that, has been installed, and we're utilizing that as part of it. So when this project was originally bid out, that fiber loop wasn't fully installed yet. So that this is pulling, like on the north tower, we're pulling from the Main Street area, and we're going to be pulling that over to the North Water Tower. So they'll be doing directional boring during that. So really this, we have the money appropriated, we have all the money, but this puts them with the change order over the $50,000 amount. I know I'm kind of getting off subject with that, but it was kind of, since this has been going on for so long, a lot of stuff has been happening that we can actually utilize our fiber line that we did with the county.
And then the same question, what's the criticality of this for tonight or next meeting? Are they ready to go?
Yeah, they're ready to go. I mean, like I said, we have the money and everything. This is working with the auditor's office. This is more of a legality thing. Make sure we are crossing our I's, dotting the T's, and all that kind of stuff. So we're just making sure we're staying compliant with everything.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the replacement of 2012 3/4 ton pickup truck for a resolution to transfer funds.
Questions or comments? Mr. Greeno.
Yeah, Jeremy, is this just transferring money from one account to another account?
Yeah, it was just put in the wrong account so they couldn't pull a PO from that. So that's all it is.
Okay, thank you.
Stay there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the purchase of 5 single-axle dump trucks.
Mr. Hellman. Well, hang on. Let him ask his question first.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious what the question's gonna be. I must have slipped a cog here somewhere, but we're buying 5 trucks for $955,000, is that accurate?
Correct.
And are these things, gold-plated or something? I mean,
Well,
what's-
you would think.
You would think.
You would
I
think.
hope.
So over the next 5 years in the capital plan, Public Works has budgeted one single-axle dump truck, essentially a snowplow truck that can be used throughout different seasons for different purposes. Over the next 5 years, one per year. With inflations, with supply chain and lead times, there was an opportunity that was presented back in November that we should look at with our cash position to lock in the pricing in 2022 to purchase 5 at one time. There were some municipality opportunities with some plans, and we decided with having a discussion with the Appropriations Committee last week that with our cash position, lock in the pricing and purchase all 5 now. And when I talk about lead time, from the time we had started this discussion last November, 2021, Q4 of 2021, the lead time went from we could get trucks in, say, June of 2022. We're looking at the end of 23 into 24 before we can get these vehicles. We're replacing 5 vehicles that are in the 25-year range, which shows that we get our life out of these vehicles, and these teams take really good care of our equipment. So, but we have to look at replacing these. Since we've started this process, the price increase is, we're looking at, for the total package, we're up over $50,000, so $10,000 a truck, just in the first quarter of this year. And our vendors are telling us for the chassis itself, which is the driving part of the truck, we're talking 8 to 9% increase or inflation year over year, as well as on the box and the snowplow and all the little gadgets that go on it to make it do what they do. That's another 8 to 9%. So, you know, if you don't lock in the price now for this, year over year, we're talking, you know, $250,000 increase as we go if you look at buying one every year for the next 5 years. So we took it to appropriations, and they voted on it and wanted to bring it here for discussion. So, sir.
Mr. Russell.
So while we'll appropriate, that doesn't mean the money's going out the door, is it?
It.
Mr. Stashak.
Appreciate the question, Councilman Russell. Initially, when this project came to my office for review, the initial thought was that the administration was going to lease purchase or rent-own the vehicles, and we looked at the question, was it debt, was it wasn't, not. The cost of doing that over the 5-year period was almost $60,000, $59,000 and change. My recommendation was, based on our cash position, we should consider paying cash for them. We had a good discussion about that, moved forward. Administration had some questions regarding, well, hey, we still want to protect our strong cash position. Do we have and I said, well, there's a potential compromise here, and the compromise is that we do what's called an internal borrowing, where the general fund would loan the capital improvement restricted account under your CIT fund the $1 million. Capital improvements would pay it back in $200,000 increments over 5 years. The cost of doing that would be market rate of interest to the capital fund and about $7,000 in attorney fees. By paying cash, you're saving all of those funds. You're strictly paying cash. You're moving forward. But in either of the two preferred options, in both cases, the money's obligated. It's off the books for all intents and purposes, and it will be paid to the vendor who we buy the trucks from.
Mr. Russell?
So we're in hey, it's Q2. In Q2 of 2022, we're paying for trucks that we're going to see delivered in 2023, 2024, and maybe 2025.
Yeah, we would pay upon delivery, but the money will be appropriated and segmented off, and as those come in, and I love what the fire chief said, it's a hostage trade situation. You give us our stuff, we'll give you our money. And that's the way we do it.
So I got two different answers. The auditor says we'll pay upon delivery, and
I didn't want to interrupt your statement. So it's going to be appropriated out of the general fund now for this project, but due to the lead time, our vendors are telling us we're not going to see a vehicle until August of 2023. And we're anticipating all 5 in 2023. But, and I don't want to create this panic, but we've been talking about supply chain on every project since January, if not sooner. So every day that this goes on, the vendor can call and say, price just went up 8%, and oh, by the way, you're not going to see it till after January 2024. And that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. It doesn't matter if it's fertilizer, chemicals, treatment, or trucks. So that's the situation we're in. We need to lock these in if we're going to move forward.
And how many total trucks do we have approximately in this class?
In the old class?
That are performing this function?
17.
17. So is there a concern that you have you purchase all these assets at one time and then they hit end of life at one time, or is it because we're talking 20 to 25 years of for the life of the asset, that kind of, you don't have that concern?
Mayor?
Ms. Mayor?
So certainly we want to be extending the longevity. Our initial plan was not to purchase all 5 at one time, and our maintenance plan was not necessarily to decommission them. So as we mentioned, there's a range of trucks from 20 years plus that we are planning to replace over the next number of years. So back to your point, we are currently looking, this is a little bit more information, we're currently looking at our entire fleet across PD, Public Works, water, sewer, et cetera, to look if there are efficiencies. So do we have concerns with replacing in the next 20 to 25 years, these all coming up at one time? No, because I trust that our team will be able to manage the expense even at that point and maintain them to draw out their lives. The reason that we're making the decision to purchase them all at one time is because there is a cost savings benefit to the city of Findlay at this point in time that we can guarantee, rather than making forecasts in the coming years.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Downtown Recreation Area, project number 319-13700.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the Broad Avenue Storm Culvert, project number 355-1800.
Questions or comments?
Jeremy. Yeah.
Mr. Russell?
That is my question. One word.
All right, so this project last week, we got a call from sewer maintenance that there was a sinkhole on the outside of Broad Avenue, just north of the church and just south of Bigelow, where Dazal Ditch ties into there. So they went out there, did some investigating, and they found that the corrugated metal pipe that is running underneath Broad Avenue, the whole bottom is gone. The joints are offset, and the pipe is in pretty bad shape. We have some pictures of it and stuff, and we sent some guys out there to do some investigating. At the bottom of the pipe is all stone and asphalt material, so the only place that really comes from is underneath the roadway. So at that time, we decided that we kind of need to get moving on this pretty quick, so we contacted 4 contractors to get us pricing as soon as possible. And working with the administration, with Rob and the mayor, we decided that ultimately this roadway should be closed down until it's fixed. You know, we don't know what the middle looks like. We can't send anyone in there to see what it looks like, and we can't get a camera in there because there's so much debris. If we clean it, we're worried that we're going to pull more material back out and it's going to be unstable. So in the middle of the road could be perfect when we dig it open, or it could be a hole size of a car. We don't know. So that's what we figured the safest spot, or safest thing to do would be to close it down. So that's why that section of roadway is closed down right now. The selected contractor that was the lowest was Helms and Sons out of Findlay. He is ready to start tomorrow if I can get the funds for that. I do have $55,000 in there. That's just for any unknowns, but his price was a little bit over $48,000, and that's asphalt and everything. We'll have to. It will take us probably tomorrow and Thursday to do that. We're going to cold patch, and then as soon as asphalt plants open up, we'll kind of do some lane closures and get that asphalt paid back, but at least it'll be back to a good condition. We'll have new pipe in there and all that kind of stuff, so it'll be ready to go. But if I can't dig tomorrow, then I think the safest thing to do would be keep the roadway closed down until the appropriate time, because you don't know what it looks like underneath.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on March 15th, 2022 to provide an update on the strategic planning process and to provide community outreach meeting information. We recommend to continue to move forward with the strategic planning process. Next meeting is on April 5th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers.
Mr. Russell?
Move to adopt the committee report.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion, questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Those opposed, nay. Any opposed, nay. It is approved.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom was referred a request to discuss the purchase of trucks. We recommend the purchase of 5 single-axle dump trucks and to pay for them out of the general fund.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of the Appropriations Committee report.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Those opposed, nay. The Appropriation Committee report is approved. Legislation, we'll start with resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 11, 2022, a resolution transferring funds within appropriated funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I think since this is just transferring funds from one to another, this is
actually buying the replacement truck.
No, he's right. Greeno's right.
this is buying,
Mr. Greeno's correct.
okay. This is not the buying of, this is just transferring the funds from one to another. Okay. Since that's the case, move that the statutory rules of council be waived on this, and this, or this resolution be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of suspending the rules of council say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough? And Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the resolution its second and third reading.
Resolution 11, 2022. Resolution 11, 2022.
Mr. Slough,
I would move for adoption of Resolution 11-2022.
second Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 12, 2022. A resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers, which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Slough,
I would move for adoption of Resolution 12-2022.
second Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-15. An ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Findlay codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough,
I would move for adoption of Ordinance 2022-015.
second Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2022-015 say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-18. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or director of public service safety of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with the Findlay YMCA to operate the Riverside Swimming Pool Facility and associated YMCA programs for public and recreational use for the city of Findlay for the 2022 to 2024 seasons and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greenham,
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-018.
second Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Mr. Russell.
I just want to voice appreciation to the YMCA for this partnership. It's been going on for many a year. I think it's one that's beneficial for both parties. It definitely makes life a lot easier for our folks because the staffing issues that go about with the pool. But I think the Y does a great job running it, and they have really enhanced things out there just by their presence and their dedication to swimming and the mission of getting kids to swim. So I do appreciate what they do.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-19. An ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for construction, appropriating and transferring funds, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-22. An ordinance authorizing the service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to sign the necessary paperwork to transfer ownership of Marathon Petroleum Company's LP solar panel field that was built on the city of Findlay's Water Pollution Control Center's campus.
Mr. Russell.
Dave, do you want to talk to council about this at all from a marathon perspective, seeing those that are here, or do you want to try to run under the radar here?
I think Dave was here to answer any questions if anybody had any.
Well, and I know Dave and I spoke last night after the flood mitigation meeting, and talking about some of the end-of-life questions that I had raised with Service Safety Director Martin, and I did appreciate what you had to say. I don't know if anybody else is interested in some of the end-of-life discussions about the field, but I guess if you have, I got my questions answered. If you have questions or something,
I
This is
I
the
only
guy
have
that
one
talked.
question. Will you state your name?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is David Blatnick. I'm with Marathon Petroleum.
You want to spell that for
Blatnik.
Thank you.
Again, I can go on a little bit. So Marathon put this back in 2013. We were looking at really R&D for solar. At the same time, we were looking at wind, a lot of different renewable projects out there. So I was inside of our renewable organization at the time, so it was one that looked at this as well as the wind and other projects. So what it did was gave us an opportunity. We put in 2 different panels. We put in 2 different systems, so there's a fixed and a tracking, and it gave us an opportunity to understand those different systems. And so what we did was, with that, at the time when we put it in, we paid for all of the installation, everything. We took the tax credit on that. We took the S credits that are the tax credits off of the SRECs from the generation of the energy. And from there, basically then gave all of the energy to the city. So that is, in turn, has been over $500,000 worth of power that has run the water treatment plant at this point in time. These panels have a life system, 20, 30, could be 40 years, depending on their use, depending on where you want to take them down to as far as drawdown and that. So from a Marathon perspective, I will tell you, we didn't always upgrade things just as fast as it should be. We didn't get in and do maintenance. Again, just looking at them. So right now, we're in the process of bringing that system up to 100%. All of the inverters will be 100%. We've talked with the city, and what we're doing is we found that over time, the tracking panels, so half the system was tracking, half was fixed. We found that there wasn't a big difference in generation from tracking to fixed that we had. So what we've actually talked to the city about is fixing all the panels in their optimal position, and that actually saves a lot of maintenance cost and other things going forward. So they will all be fixed. They can run, but what we found maintenance-wise, the biggest issue we had maintenance-wise was the tracking systems. So at this point in time, we would look to fix those systems. And then, again, the question you had was the longevity of these and kind of end of life. There's several things you can do. Today, we're still just getting into the infancy of solar panels coming off. There are a couple companies out there that are recycling these. I wouldn't say there's a lot of them, and I wouldn't say it's cost-effective yet to recycle. They can go to a landfill today, currently. The second piece would be is in another 20 years, I believe, with the amount of panels that are coming off of cycle, we will see somebody out there trying to recycle these at a much greater rate and probably a much lower cost to do that. The other thing that can happen too with the system, so does the entire system have to come out? You could pull all of the steel out. Talking to the city, there's an opportunity to either reuse that or use the scrap and scrap that steel and use or take the cost of that scrap steel going forward. Or you could leave the system in place and replace the panels and put new panels in time to go back and look at your energy cost. The big cost of that system are the inverters and the system itself. So with that, the panels aren't the major cost of that. So that may be an opportunity down the road to look at that system. So any questions?
Mr. Russell? No? No? Mr. Hellman?
I've got a quick question, David, if you
Yes.
would. And I may have missed it in your comment, but the life expectancy of that system, in your estimation, would be what?
About 30 years.
Including the inverters and the panels and all of that?
So the inverters and panels, there are maintenance, those are probably 10 to 15 years. And again, we're already in this, we're at the point where we've had some inverter issues. So we're fixing all of those and doing those. So it's been in since 13, so that's been almost 10 years. But, some of it, again, just wear and tear on a system.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Russell?
Dave, you had mentioned some, not only the revenue stream wasn't all just the electrical generation, but there's also, solar credits or some other.
Yes. So the way the system works is with solar, they actually have SRECs, or SRECs are your credits that basically are generated. So with every so many kilowatts, there's a credit that's created. Those are able to be sold on an open market. So currently today, we have RINs for renewable fuels. SREX is that for a solar. And then, so what you have is the opportunity down the road to either sell that or keep that and then claim the green energy. So you can retire that S credit and basically go back and say, you've used that green power and take credit for green energy inside of your system. So you can do that either way. You can sell them, you can keep them, and take the credit for green power.
And then, so to Rob, is there consideration what we do with that SREX or whatever the specific term was?
Yeah, there have been discussions about that, and there might be opportunities with other companies out there that might want to partner with us, or we can, to Dave's point, we can actually utilize that credit. So the opportunity's there.
And do we have an idea of what, if we would go to the general market and sell these, what they would be, what kind of value we'd potentially be seeing?
I don't have those numbers at this point.
So, one of the reasons, when we were bringing them in, and that we didn't sell a lot because the S credits market has really dropped when they initially came out and where they were at, and partially because they were supposed to be carve-outs inside some of the legislation inside different states. As that's changed and so that SRX credit value hasn't been there that, as much. So again, Marathon kept those. That was the one thing we did keep when we put the process and the system in. I think we sold one time. The rest of the time we've kept those and we just have them.
Okay.
So.
And then Rob, you had mentioned in an email that you were having conversations with, and I can't remember the name of the firm, that we're going to look at it and talk about maintenance.
Yes. I have yet to receive that invoice at this point, but looking at what Marathon's cost year over year was for operations and maintenance, we have a pretty good idea what that's going to be. So we are getting invoices from a firm that the WPC already uses and is happy with their services. So we're waiting for that. I was expecting it actually to have it before today, and I'm sorry I don't have it. They've been out on the site and they've collected their data. I just haven't gathered that. But if the numbers are, I anticipate the numbers to be lower than what Marathon has been spending, and with that, we're at a benefit with this, taking this over. Yes, sir.
Greeno.
Since I was still working there when these went in, I just want to say thank you to Marathon because that has been a great savings for the city. The water pollution control is probably your biggest user of electric in the city. And the $50,000 to $60,000 a year that they have saved has been a tremendous amount of savings on a $350,000 budget. We're saving $50,000 to $60,000, so that has worked out really well for us. I guess my real question is for Rob, the maintenance of the area, the grounds. Mowing that, I've done that many a times myself.
Yep.
It's not an easy thing, and I know that they have. I believe Marathon had hired somebody to do that. Are we going to be able to do that with WPC staff, or is that going to be somewhere, because it's going to take a couple days to do it?
It is, and I've worked with Public Works as well as WPC to look how that would look like us absorbing that work. And we planned ahead, and we're going to be able to absorb that maintenance.
Okay, all right. Because I know WPC, they're tight on personnel like everybody is, but.
Yes.
Okay.
But when we went through the budgetary process, we were planning ahead of what this would look like, and I was worked ahead with, again, Public Works, the mowing division, and WPC, and we're going to be able to absorb this.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
First reading for ordinance 2022-23, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
P&A Industries, I thank them for the donation, as council generally does when we get donations from the public like this. We like to put it to work, and so for that reason, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-023 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-23. Ordinance 2022-23.
Mr. Hellman.
Move for the approval of ordinance 2022-023.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-24, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to partner with Hancock County by entering into a partnership agreement for the administration of the Community Housing Impact and Preservation, hereinafter referred to as CHIP, program for the purpose of addressing local housing needs within Hancock County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-25, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for various projects, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-26, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-27, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract with TSC Communications Incorporated to extend the city of Findlay's existing fiber lines to the north and south water towers and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
I think Jeremy made it pretty clear that this is a one that they need to have done tonight, and therefore I motion that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-027 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Oh, I already said Warnicki, sorry.
Do you want me to vote twice?
No.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-27, ordinance 2022-27.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-027.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-28, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
Yeah, I want to make a motion that statutory rules of council be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading. Because if we wait another couple council meetings, who knows what the price may go up to. So let's get it locked in now.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
The rules of council has been suspended. The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-28, ordinance 2022-28.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-028.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno?
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-29, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract or contracts with Strand and Associates for the design of the downtown recreation area Phase 2 benching of the Blanchard River, appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-30, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract with Helms and Sons Excavating Incorporated to repair a storm culvert underneath Broad Avenue, appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
I move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-030 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Rules of council has been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-30. Ordinance 2022-30.
Mr. Palmer.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-30.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted. Old business. New business. Ms. Mayor.
Just a couple of quick items. First of all, thank you for your expedient attention to the Broad Avenue issue. With that, we are evaluating and going to be looking into where we may have corrugated metal piping underneath roadways, especially throughout the city, given that they are kind of an ongoing concern. So we will be trying to get a little more preemptive on issues that may arise with that. Additionally, I wanted to remind everyone that we do have the strategic planning workshops tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow at the Alumni Memorial Union, which is the building directly next to the old main building, kind of there by the library, on the University of Findlay campus at 6 p.m. And then there are two on Thursday, 1 p.m. at 50 North, and I believe it's 5 o'clock or 5:30. I keep messing up. I think it's 5 o'clock on Thursday at Alexandria. So please make sure you attend, but also make sure, more importantly, to share that across your networks to get folks to show up for that. Thank you, Mr. Hellman. There we go. 5 p.m. I don't know. I keep thinking 5:30. Anyways, the other item I wanted to provide a quick update. We have had about 29 individuals that have been able to go to various entities through the City of Findlay funding of the jail. Many of those have gone to CCNO. It's been going quite well. And I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate your continued support in that, and that it has been able to, one, help get folks to serve their time and rotate through and get that off their sheet, but also keep some folks off of our streets that needed to be. So I appreciate your support in that. And finally, continuing to support our law enforcement. Obviously, a tragedy last week with the loss of Officer Francis. And though he wasn't a Findlay police officer, he was a brother in blue and an individual who had spent extensive time in the city of Findlay and serving to the Hancock County community. So as we're remembering him and his family, please make sure to reach out and keep the law enforcement and his family in mind. I know our team had many interactions with him. He was a wonderful individual and will be dearly missed. And though I am upset I won't be able to attend the funeral this week, we will have a strong representation of the city of Findlay and the Findlay Police Department there. Thank you. Any questions for me? The
Thank
only
you.
other item is the executive.
Any other new business? Mr. Russell?
Two items. First, the easy one, planning and zoning meeting April 14th. I think that's it. Oh, there's April. Yeah, April 14th at noon in the council office. And last night I was able to attend the flood mitigation meeting, the update from Santec and the Maumee Valley Flood Conservancy District. Thank you. Very informative, and if you get a chance to see what the plans are, and it's worth taking a look. And one of the things that pertains to it is Ordinance 2022-029, which is to kind of do the design work on the Phase 2 benching. So more or less the east side of Main Street there on the north side of the river. And looking for recreational opportunities that can be created because of the benching. And I did read was one of the readers for the request for qualifications or whatever process that we use to select Strand. And there's a lot of neat ideas. And once you see the Stantec presentation, you can kind of get an idea what really can take place over there on that side of the river. And there's some wonderful opportunities. So I appreciate the Conservancy District hosting the meeting and the information that was shared, and just do suggest council, if you get a chance to see the presentation, it's worth taking a look at. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mr. Niemeyer.
Well, a little bit of old business. Maybe Jeremy or Rob or even Dave could say real quick how the new trucks will have to go to Kalida and how it affects the drivers being single axle with their CDL licenses.
So the current trucks that we're replacing are manual transmission. These new ones will be automatic. So how the CDL is, if you have a automatic CDL, then you can only drive automatic trucks. So these are the last 5 manual transmission trucks in our fleet. We will have all automatic. So people that come in and they do have their CDL and they're only automatic certified, they can continue to drive any of our vehicles for plowing or anything like that.
Thank you. Mr. Stashak, do you have your CDL?
No, but I do have an auctioneer's license and can chant for you. There's 2 items I didn't want to put into a letter, but they're of importance to you, and I thought I would share quickly. One is, as you all know from getting your emails, that we're in the process of our annual audit, and we're moving forward in that and gathering the information and hope to get through that as quickly as possible. But the state auditor did put out a memo, a bulletin, and I wanted to make you aware. We all know that Ohio and Mr. Yost was able to get millions and millions of dollars for the state. The state auditor has said that those funds will have to go into an opioid abatement fund when we ultimately get them. So what will happen is they'll come in, they'll be put in a special fund, so not the general fund, and then there are some very specific approved purposes for that money. And once we get closer, I couldn't even determine from some of the phone calls I made to the state auditor's office when we even expect to get that money, but I wanted you to be aware that when it comes in, it'll go to a special fund. Second thing quickly, some of you may be aware the state is looking at increasing our contribution to pensions, and had done some calculations for the mayor at her request, and you folks have been very interested in severance and some of the things that are going on that cost us money. Over a 5-year period, should the state pass the bill increasing the contribution of the government entity for police and fire pensions, it will cost us approximately from 2023 to 2027 about $1.75 million. So the cost would be significant, so that you're aware of that. I don't take a position one side or the other on the issue, but you need to be aware of it, and it's an important number, and that's a big number. So, any questions for me? Thank you.
Just real quick, that was the opioid settlement that they did with the pharmaceutical companies. That's the money you're discussing?
Yes, yeah. So it was a big deal.
Any other new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Russell? Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor raised your hand. I'm sorry, you can't make.
Well, we're going to have a executive session.
You need to make
afterwards.
a motion. Yeah, make a motion to adjourn into executive section.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to adjourn into executive session for the discussion of the purchase of properties.
Second, Mr. Greeno. I understand there will be no other business after this. Agreed?
Correct.
All those in favor of adjourning into executive session say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned into executive session.